You were.
That's what you asked for.
Are we ready, Chris?
Yeah, we're on.
We're live.
Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I, by default, have been elected to start this meeting. What you're seeing at home is a joint meeting of the Newmarket School Board and the Newmarket Town Council. A number of factors have called us together this evening. One, which I think all have been hearing for some time, is the hope to improve the working relationship between the two boards. It's been the subject of many residents' inquiries. I was told by one resident on Friday, who has served on both boards, that in the past that the subject emerged when he served 20 years ago. So it's certainly not a new concept. Secondly, the town charter was recently revised, which institutionalized an annual meeting between the town council and the school board. Thirdly, the governor of New Hampshire just signed some legislation, I think about a month ago, Steve, which allows boards like ours in Newmarket to share services. And I'm also hopeful that it was not only just a legislation, but I assume the action was supportive of boards within towns to share resources. Our newest executive on the community team, Meredith Nadeau, who will be starting July 1st, we're in a great position to have her join us, because in Cape Elizabeth, where she currently is, Cape Elizabeth shares services. It's been in place for a number of years, and she's going to talk about it a little bit later on. And in discussions with our town administrator, he's looking forward, in a very prideful way, I'm sure, of getting Newmarket out there in the community and in New Hampshire as an innovator. It's probably going to help your career a little bit, Steve, I would think. So the stars are aligned. It's never been this way before. We really seem to have everything pulling in the right direction for us. The town council and the school board elected or selected 2 members from each board to help coordinate this meeting tonight. From the school board, it's Kim Shelton and myself, and from the town council, it's Dale Pike and Tony Weinstein. We've had 2 meetings, probably 6 hours in duration, many telephone calls, in the hope of putting together an agenda that we could work with tonight. And that's what you have before you. And it's just it's not a proposed agenda for tonight, but it's our best thoughts about what a good process might be. One of the conclusions that we reached pretty early on was that the best people to lead this shared services discussion are our new school superintendent and the town administrator. We had some pretty lengthy discussions about alternatives, about subcommittees and subcommittees within the boards, but we really would like to recommend to folks that we turn it over to them to come back to the town council and come back to the school board and talk about things that they, number one, deem as being priorities, number two, winners, things that we can do the first time and get it right, And then I can tell you on the school side, we've got some immediate issues that we're dealing with right now with facilities, where we really need to get moving ahead on that. So each of us is going to speak to one of the items on the agenda, and I'll pass it over to Dale.
Thanks for that introduction, Al. I think that covered most things. I just did want to mention that we have a guest here tonight. Alan Gould is here from MRI, and really prior to the things getting really going as far as looking at shared services between school and town, we had also been looking for any way we could improve efficiency within the town, ways that we could regionalize, really just looking at how well we are doing things. So we had contracted with MRI to provide us with a report that would look at those issues, and we've asked them and commented during our meeting that we recognize as the stars begin to align, as Al said, that there might be an opportunity to find efficiencies in combining some services with the schools. So some of that will be reflected perhaps in that report. So, I think at this point, I would turn it over to Steve and start talking about where we are.
Sure. One of the things that, before we scheduled this meeting, I wanted to make sure to see, what do we currently share? What do we work together on? One of the things that I will say, I've been in this, Newmarket's my 5th community that I've worked in, and the communication between the SAU and the town here is not normal for municipalities and schools for a lot of places in New Hampshire. This wouldn't rarely, if ever, happens in other municipalities. Is a firewall between the school and the town, and then never the two shall meet. Here, since I've been here, there's been very open communication between the two, and I think that's a positive to work together to look at what we can do to share services and programs. What I did for my department heads was I asked them to go through the exercise of, well, what do you currently do for the school? No matter how big and no matter how small. Some of the reasons why I wanted to put the small things up there is to show how difficult and sometimes silly it is for small things to get done between the two agencies. For example, for the IT, I asked them and I'll tell you, one of the things all department heads said, well, I don't know. We don't know what we share. Because for most of them, it's just part of common business practice, day-to-day stuff that they work with the school. Again, that's not normal in a lot of places. For IT, a lot of knowledge sharing, assist with issues. They bounce things off each other all the time. They share small pieces of equipment, and the IT actually does all the testing for security cameras that we do have and monitor items. The building inspector does facility consultations and free permit reviews and inspections. Police, which is something nobody would ever think of, is we provide security services for the schools. Some districts, maybe not in New Hampshire, but across the country, have to hire their own security personnel to monitor things during the day. Recreation, we share field space, and we do the facility and field scheduling. Planning, we've provided advice on planning, land, and zoning matters. The CIP planning, which has been very active with the school and town. They work together. And mapping, any maps that the school may need, we do it. They come down and we do it for them. Finance administration, financial advice. The business administrator and our finance director bounce things off each other all the time and look for assistance. A lot of it comes also from when we need to set tax rates. I mean, we usually have to work together to make sure everything's in place for that. This is a small thing, but it was a big thing because it took some time. We share a postage machine. It sounds like a tiny thing. Most places you wouldn't have to do that, and you duplicate services, and that's actually kind of expensive once it gets into it. Town hall utilities, we're in one building. We don't separate the two. The use of all of our town meeting facilities, and that goes both ways. The school lets us use the gymnasium for elections and meeting space, and we let the school, of course, use our facilities here as well. And we do group purchasing, not a lot. We started with heating oil this year, and we do the annual town report together. A lot of places that's separate. And the big one, I would say, is Public Works. Snow removal. We do all the sweeping for the schools, for the outside. We do the maintenance and lining of the parking lot. We clean catch basins. We haul items or provide trucks to haul items for the schools. We do special projects. Yes, we build for it, but we bid it for the Carpenter property demolition and the construction of the field there. We've built pads for the modular classrooms at the elementary school, and we've installed water, sewer, and underground electrical conduits for the school district. Those services, it was interesting. Board member Zink mentioned the fact about the Senate bill that was passed and signed. When I went and testified on that, a lot of people, other communities said, you do that for them? What do you charge? I go, we don't. It's coming from the same pot. Why would we charge for that? And one attorney actually said, you're supposed to charge. And I said, I don't believe so. And I talked to our own counsel, and he said, no. But you're taking from the same pot. If we didn't do it, then the school district would be required to hire somebody to do the plowing. And it doesn't make sense. If we have somebody who can do it on their route, and it doesn't add anything that additional, we should be doing that. So those are just some of the current shared services. And I'll tell you, in my seat, with the past superintendents, it's the same as with the IT and the finance advice. I would do the same with the superintendent, and the superintendent would ask me questions at the same time. We work together to make sure we schedule things about the same time. And I know the new superintendent and I will be doing the same thing. We have already had discussions. So we do work together, but I do believe there's a lot more and more productive areas that we can do this. I think we can find large efficiencies if we don't continue to work, put everything in silos. And I think that's the big thing, and we can't be afraid to lose control over something or work together on something just because it may not look the same the day after. So I think that's my portion for where we currently share.
Does that leave it to
That's
me
to you.
at this point?
And
Okay.
somebody with the experience of doing it.
Well, so I've been in Cape Elizabeth for 5 years, and Cape Elizabeth does have a shared service model. It's referred to as the one town concept in town, and it came into play around sort of tight financial times and a time when school districts were consolidating. And interestingly enough, I read today that PBS is doing a little piece tonight on school consolidation in Vermont, because they're finding, as populations decrease in schools across New England, that sustaining all of those services independently is more challenging. So I think towns, small communities find themselves in those positions very frequently these days. Cape Elizabeth is about 10,000 residents year-round, so roughly the same size as Newmarket, a little bit larger. And we share services in a number of areas. We could definitely duplicate much of that list, but we also share a business administrator and actually a full business office. We have one business administrator, one HR person, one payroll person, one accounts payable person. They work for school and town. We share a facilities director. That person works for school and town, which makes things like a shared capital improvements plan, which I know we'll talk about later, a much easier task, because that person is sort of the intermediary between both bodies as we're mapping out projects into the future. We share a technology director. Again, we just built a brand new library. Our technology director was very much involved in helping them with the design and planning of the technology infrastructure needs, but at the same time is providing that similar support to school. And so our technicians are able to share support and services as well as the expertise of the director. We also share Public Works in very much the same way. They maintain our fields, they do our plowing, and our trash removal. So there are a lot of ways that we've been able to sort of pull together to share those resources. We have a shared supervision model. I meet regularly with our town manager, whose office, much like here, is in the same building right down the hall. If an issue arises, we communicate with each other, and I would say in my experience, the 3 keys are really good communication, both between your town administrator and your school district administrator, as well as regular meetings with department heads. And our department heads, those shared services department heads meet with administrative meetings on both sides. And we meet together periodically, but they meet with our school meetings and they attend the town meetings so that there's no communication gap for those folks. Collaboration, there has to be a willingness of everybody involved to work together and problem solve, because there will be issues that arise from time to time, just like in our day-to-day work now. That doesn't go away. It's not all music and magic. There are still challenges, but again, we've been able to resolve those pretty easily, and I think it's very doable. For us, it's not a dollar for dollar. We're not constant, we spent $10 putting in your electrical conduit, putting on that outlet cover today. It's not like that. It's very much viewed as it's one community, it is one pool of resources, and we're sharing the support across the board. And we do try to look from time to time, is it somewhat evenly distributed? Because it can be difficult in more challenging economic times when the public may believe that one body or the other is overexpending in a particular area. So we try to do some straightforward looks at the accounting and how that works, but we aren't trying to keep a tally on a day-to-day basis. So.
Meredith, how long is that? We can ask questions. How long has that been in place in Cape Elizabeth?
Well, at least 10 years. I was trying to find that, and I don't have Wi-Fi access here at the moment because I followed directions really well from Chris. But going back to before 2007, the town comprehensive plan in 2007 talked about the development of that process. But my recollection, it was from the late 90s, early 2000s.
What form of government do you have?
Town council.
Is there a school board like Newmarket, so they're separate?
There is 2 separate bodies. Yep.
One of the interesting things, if folks are supportive of this, is Meredith has offered to have the subcommittee that I talked about earlier come up and meet with the town manager, meet with the school administration people, so we can get a little bit more knowledgeable about it. So.
Well, I think we touched on the current law. And I think in terms of steps forward on this, really, if there are additional questions, this is a good time to ask them. But it's once we started with the process of having the subcommittee meet and look what this was about and began having conversations with Steve and Meredith, it really became clear that the best way forward was to let them put together a more detailed proposal, as Al said. So free to ask more questions at this point, but our expectation and hope is that unless somebody has a serious objection, we will, as a combined group, be able to endorse a process where they put together a more detailed proposal, give us an idea on the timeline. Some of this will have to move more rapidly than other if it's going to happen, because with the finance director, some of these things need to happen fairly quickly. So with that, if there are additional questions, please raise them. If not, I think I don't know if we have any ability to vote as a combined body.
CIP?
Oh, yeah. I don't
Well, I thought we would do that.
Oh, okay.
That's my idea. Was we would cover this because the CIP is really a separate.
Okay.
And the question would be how you say because of financial director, what are you looking at for a timeline? Because we're looking for a BA, we need to continue with our school. So are we talking just sort of like the CIP looking into the future? Or are we talking about next week?
I think part of that depends, and I don't want to speak for you, but I would say that largely depends on the consensus of these 2 bodies that are sitting here with us tonight. I think there are different ways to frame that. There's some work to do around job descriptions and laying out those pieces, but I don't think we're looking at, a year from now. I would say we probably are looking at something within the next several months, but I think there are a lot of ways to to address short-term issues that I know districts around us have experienced. So if you have an opening, for example, in your business office, and you're going to have a temporary gap, there are some ways to maintain that so that you get through your audit and wrap up your year end without doing any harm to the district or the town. And that there could be a temporary solution to that if we needed a longer-term solution.
And that was it. On our side,
Exactly.
we've been having an interim finance director
Right.
before me. It's worked for us, but we've also realized that this is a good time for us to look, okay, do we need a finance director 5 days a week, or is it a position that we could share? I've looked at actually sharing with other communities as well, just in case. That was when I first started. It was difficult to get somebody to agree to that, but I mean, that's basically what we have now with the contracted one. On my side is, if the school district wants to go with an interim, then that's something I would probably want to talk with the school district and say, okay, is that how we start to look at the sharing? Do we get an interim for both bodies at this point? And then that can come back to us. But that's something that, if I have to talk with the superintendent.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my sense would be if there's an interest on the part of both boards, that Steve and I can work out a solution to move forward, to kind of keep things moving in that direction, to the extent that it makes sense to both of us, which I think is what I'm hearing, to explore sharing that particular service.
Way before I would have tried, I think the school district needs a business administrator. They need a good one, and they need a better one than they've had, and they need some continuity in that office, and there's a lot of stuff I think that we're going to have to clean up in the early going. More importantly, we've been talking, and I thought that was where we started, so now we've morphed a bit, which is fine. We talked about facilities, and that there certainly doesn't necessarily seem to be the same urgency in the town side, although there are some small pockets of it maybe, to deal with property management or facilities management. Facilities have been an ongoing conversation for this community for so long, and we're hopefully moving our way towards some resolution. And we put some dollars in the budget to try to tackle that and move forward with some direction so that we weren't constantly hiring educational administrators because they knew how to build stuff or because they thought maybe they could sell us on a building. So we're trying to move in that direction. I hope that can be something that we can look at, because
It's coming up.
that's
We're
real.
gonna talk about it in a minute.
That's real.
Absolutely. The problem on our side, we don't have that budgeted.
Well, and that's one of the things, I guess, the other thing I would love to
Yeah.
throw out there is, I think the body ought to talk a little bit. Not everything that is efficient is going to be, not everything where we could find common efficiencies is going to be about saving dollars. A lot of it ought to be, and that ought to be the driving force. But for instance, facilities, in this case, is about saving money on a far larger scale, on a far more intangible scale. We could have saved this and this and this and this had we done these things better, had we not wasted funds on that, had we not invested foolishly in that. I don't want to categorize things too broadly, but facilities direction and management seems to be an area where we could save money for the longest run if we were doing that. But it potentially means spending some dollars we don't spend now, and there may or may not be any palette for adding a service that we really need, or adding a tool that a resource that we should have, if it's not offset by some other savings. Maybe the answer is we should look for those offsets even if they're not in the same area. So if there's not an offset in facilities because we have to add, or if there's not a savings in facilities because we have to add, can we find efficiency somewhere else that'll offset that so that we can find balance? But I think that's probably important to know when we're talking about shared services. Are we talking about money-saving opportunities, or are we talking about getting a job done as well as possible moving forward and finding efficiencies in that process?
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to jump in on what Nathan said. Steve and I, you and I have talked about this a little bit, and I think it kind of goes to what you were saying, is if the job descriptions get reworked a little bit, the business administrator for the school wouldn't have to spend so much time dealing with facilities. There was a lot of that I think went on. So sharing, whether it's a business administrator or a finance director, as it were, let's say just for giggles that it's 2.5 days in town stuff and 2.5 days in the other, and having a facilities person handle overall facilities. We're not really adding a position, nor are we cutting a position, but we're streamlining expertise, which I think is going to be an efficiency, instead of asking somebody that knows ping pong balls to sell baseballs. Combining IT is huge, love that idea, and payroll and that sort of thing. That would be a lot more efficient on that side. So maybe if that happens, it doesn't save money per se,
But in the
but
aggregate.
it's done more smartly.
Yep.
And we won't be spending good money after bad. I mean, I just,
I like that description too, good money after bad, yeah.
well, I think there's been some of that,
There has
but
been.
I
I
think
think
we're
there
in a
has been.
lot better position than we used to be.
And operationally, when we're in silos like we are, I have one IT person. I have one payroll person. I have one accounts payable person. So if something happens, then there's a delay and somebody has to change the focus to that other one, that other position. But if you combine them or look at ways to, for IT.
One
say
and a half, one and a half.
You one and a half, and you can have somebody who said, okay, that person's gonna be on vacation, I don't have to panic what's gonna happen to my IT system during that vacation time. There's somebody else who can back that up. Or I don't have to worry about somebody's out on payroll, because there's another payroll individual, because just the volume, they can just jump in and probably do more work on that day. I think those are the keys there. When it comes to facilities, you're right, the planning is the key in there. I mean, we probably both have our business administrators focusing on things that a facilities manager should be doing. Purchasing oil, purchasing, going for bids for those kind of items, and contracts, and other items for telecom, those kind of items. But we don't have that individual for the buildings to focus on that. So a facilities manager would do that for us.
I'm less interested in a bid for oil.
Yeah.
Which I think a BA does. I only do this, guys, I'm a BA, right?
know,
So
I know.
It's a little hard.
I know, it's
But
like-
what a BA doesn't want to do is
Yeah.
write the specification that goes out on the street for an RFP.
Right.
And I don't imagine a finance director's doing it, or should be doing it either.
Right.
Because an engineer, or somebody who is playing the role of an engineer on TV, ought to be doing that for us on a regular basis. And what we do is, we hire architects.
We have that service too.
We hire architects for ridiculous money per hour to do something that could be done with a best practice model in-house by somebody with some greater background in that stuff. That's the biggest.
Absolutely, no, that's what we'd get at, and
I
that's,
sat on the CIP committee this year. I sat on the CIP committee, and the library asked for 2 furnaces. The town hall asked for new furnaces. The school asked for new furnaces. So that's just an example where, I don't know what you want to call efficiencies, but who's managing the parade here? You know, we're going to put in oil, gas, or are we going to use Joe or Sam? So it just on the facilities thing again, there's so many examples out there where people are presenting opportunities, are presenting
Onesie, twosies.
projects that they don't understand, and they haven't collaborated with there is no counterpart, so.
as you probably, most of the time, it's somebody comes in who's doing the work on the furnace or something, and says, you need a new furnace at some point. Okay, let's figure out what that's gonna cost, and instead of saying, well, are we asking for the best furnace for what we're doing? Are we doing those kind of efficiencies? It's, you need a new one. So we just come in with a number and say, look, we gotta budget that because we need a new one. Who said? Well, the guy who's selling it to us.
Neither board, I know, because I've watched them, neither board likes to have somebody bring forward a proposition that's based upon what the commission, the salesman said we
Right.
should have. I mean, and so on the facility side, and certainly with oil, with anything like that, having a body in there that can chase some of that, especially given where the school is headed, which hopefully is fixing, by whatever means, some of the facilities issues that we still face, so.
To your point, Nate, I think if the school district is heading, hopefully forward into a renovation or building project, whatever is determined, having someone as the designated point person for that project, not separately from a potential clerk of the works, and that's a decision to be made later.
Right.
But someone who is really on the ball, following up with those phone calls to architects, making sure that, the water tests have been done and the documents are signed and someone has, crossed off the contact with the insurance company and dig safe and whatever needs to be done. That's a critical need.
Smartly, the DOE, New Hampshire Department of Education, changed their rules a few years ago to require a maintenance plan for any funded building project, because the experience was that, people, school districts weren't perhaps minding the facilities as well as they should have, which was costing, unnecessary money and, systems failing early or, so, so the point is that any building program DOE approved needs a plan, and that's not something a BA would typically have their arms around or have knowledge about.
And really, with a shared facilities individual too, it allows us to present a budget that probably has a better chance of passing. Because if a facilities manager comes in and says, hey, look, the elementary school, I don't know, so I'm just making this up, so please don't take this as gospel. The elementary school needs all new windows this year, and it's going to cost $200,000. But the town also needs a new roof on this building. The facilities manager can say, okay, you know what? We can't go ask the voters for both in the same year because it's not going to fly. Can we get, which one's more important? We'll say the windows, and we'll just schedule next year for the roof. And I think that's the key, too, is that we don't want to be competing with each other for the same tax dollars.
Yeah.
And that's, sadly, it hasn't happened, but it may happen. And at least this way, we can have the communication to figure out what's the priorities and have one person looking at both to be able to tell us that.
Steve, that's one of the reasons why, as we get into this next part in a minute, looking at what's on the CIP for the town and the CIP for the schools, because it is the same pot of funds that we're looking at, and making sure that we're communicating with each other, knowing what's on the horizon, so that, like you said, if the windows are the priority this year, we know that the roof is going to come next year, whatever it ends up being.
And we did that. I mean, we knew we had the wastewater bond and we had the school issues coming up at the same time. If we put both of those out on the ballot at the same time, they both would have failed. The school understood that the wastewater, if we didn't do it the year we did, we were going to get significant fines. And they said, okay, we'll wait. We're not ready quite yet either. So we'll wait. And we went forward with the wastewater bond. And, now we're in the construction phase of that. But I think if you put them both out there in a situation like that, it would scare the voters off. It would scare me off to try to get that through.
It's not just putting them both out the same year, it's the community prioritizing where our limited financial resources can be allocated.
Yeah.
There's only so much pie out there, and you can't get 110% of it out of people. So saying, this year, this has to be the priority, because DES is telling us we have to do it or whatever reason. I think that's never really happened. I think we've tried multiple times, it was inferred. But to actually have someone looking both short and long term together at what the needs of the community are and prioritizing it is crucial.
Yeah.
Naively, being a relatively new school board member, one of the things that there are people in this room that I have not met until tonight, because who are town council members. I could have made myself more available to come to meetings. They probably could have done the same too. But this gives the opportunity to sit in a room so that we get to a point of priority and talking about real things. There's a relationship built, and I think that's one of the major points of this meeting too, aside from other things.
One of the things that we talked about in the smaller group was that, it's easy to kind of go off on tangents and think, this is how it should be implemented, this is what we think, and whether that's as a small subcommittee or individual boards. But what we're really hoping for is to put it to the two of you and have you guys come to us with a plan individually, obviously, where we can then discuss it in our individual boards and then approve a plan or not, depending on what it is. So, just to return briefly to Elizabeth's question, I'm sorry but in terms of a timeline, I'm not here until July 1. And so that is a little bit of a wrinkle in, certainly Steve and I have had a couple conversations and exchanged a couple of emails, sort of making sure that we both knew what was happening walking into this meeting. Yeah. But, I want to be respectful to the fact that I'm wrapping up work still in another place, and I haven't had time, beyond sort of what I've heard to actually see the office in operation here.
Kind of brings up a question I had. nothing gets me more scared than a steps forward slide that has nothing on it. So like,
I think that's where,
like steps forward, nothing. Just because historically it's what's tended to happen. We have a meeting like this and then nothing happens. So what are like the concrete milestones, like that we can look forward to, like the report we're gonna get from them, next time we're gonna get together, just something.
Sort of what we thought, Phil, and you guys can, we would take the approval from both individual boards to have us continue being in the subcommittee role, and have us sort of taking the lead with, following up with them with the timelines to make sure that things are happening, to avoid the pitfall that is inevitable when people don't watch the store. And then making sure that when the report is done, when Meredith gets on board and all those things happen, that we present it to the individual boards for then moving forward. That's sort of where we have it. You guys can tell us if you'd like for us to continue in the roles in that role and with that sort of stewardship, and then we can move forward if that's what you think.
I'm just one person, but what I would like is a date as to when we can expect this from them, and probably with enough lead time before the budget season that we can have like conversation. All right.
Yeah, I don't think either of us views this as particularly complicated.
No.
But we want to be thoughtful about it. And there is work.
And one of the
to
things
do.
too is, I may have a plan, and the council may agree, and we may agree, but her board may not agree, or my council won't agree, so you've got those moving parts as well. So that's why the subcommittee idea is sort of like a focus group before bringing it to the full council, that we could, or school boards, that we can bounce it off of and say, look, this is what we would suggest and how we get there. And then bring the proposal to the full council and to school board. Sorry, I keep saying just one second.
Yeah, I think we discussed whether, one of the things the subcommittee could figure out is whether we would be advantageous if needed to have another combined town, there's nothing that prevents us from having another combined town council school board meeting. It may not be needed. If it's sort of straightforward, next steps, and is, depending on the comments we have now about it, it may not be necessary to have that additional meeting. On the other hand, if there are concerns, one of the things, this is sort of an aside, but one that I liked that term Al had when we were talking about it, because we thought people might ask for, what are the ways we get out of it if one of the other bodies hates it? What Al came up with the term. He said, well, you want a prenup for this. So there's some way that if somebody hates it, it doesn't have to be forever. We can unwind it if it's not working. But I think, so I think there is some additional sort of dialogue that might be easier if the two boards want the subcommittee to do that. We're willing to do it. If not, that's fine too. But those are the questions. Do we need to meet together again, or do we just have something that seems, and we can pick that up from our respective boards and committees as to whether or not we can just go for a vote on parts of this. Because I don't think there's going to be, it may not necessarily be that we're going to see some grand plan where it's all integrated. I think there's going to be pieces of this that will move forward earlier, and other pieces may happen later on, and it's just going to be an understanding about how it's working and how we get out of it if we don't like it.
And this may be an oversimplification, but again, one of the predominant themes that went through at the subcommittee's meetings was truly handing this over to the two executives that are responsible for the respective departments. I think that the result of this, Phil mentioned earlier that we've been trying to do this for, how long, Phil?
Ever.
10 years, 12 years, and nothing has proceeded. And I think if you would like to use this subcommittee as a institution to manage, to make sure that the communications happen and that the schedules happen, we've all agreed we'd be willing to do that. But more importantly, I think, is a true, and I don't know how you do it, but a true endorsement that says to these folks, you're going to spend some time on this, and that's okay. It's a big enough priority. We had a very similar discussion with the school board and the town council at the only other meeting I've been to, where everybody raised their hands and said, yep, and nothing happened. I don't know how to articulate commitment, but I think that's really important.
Steve, can I ask you, can we have a vote here? Is it worth anything to do that?
Posted meeting.
It's a posted meeting. Do we want to, does anybody want to raise an objection to the idea of having them, Steve and Meredith, coming back with a plan? Is there any opposition out there? If not, I would consider that to be evidence of a unanimous vote for that they move forward. But speak now or forever hold your peace on, I guess.
I think Phil nailed it. Pick any date you like in anticipation of budget time, so don't be guilty of leaving us such that we say, God, you know, if you'd only said this before.
July 5th?
Yeah.
Well, that might be pushing it, but I did say,
Oh, but, you know,
we wrote down
the
August
holiday.
1st.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say, by September, we ought to be looking at some preliminary conversation,
Yeah.
because by October, you need to be plugging numbers in if you're gonna do stuff.
That's,
I have to produce my budget to the council by charter October 15th.
Oh, yeah, so back
Well,
that
I've
up.
gotta
I
do
didn't
it
realize it was that
Be
early,
before
yeah,
that.
so.
Phil, I'm going to piggyback onto what you said. Yes, we do want a date and all of that, and I think it kind of goes to what I know the council has been working on, and I'm sure the school board does too. I'm happy having the subcommittee as the linchpin, that sort of thing, but it goes back to, first of all, Meredith and Steve working together, doing it, getting it done, and us trusting them to do that, but also verify. It's up to us as the council, the school board, to check up with our leaders and make sure that the follow-through is there and that's leading. That's our responsibility as the boards. But that being said, I have complete confidence that they will get on it, and I've heard some great ideas coming out of all of this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would also love to get some community input. We didn't add a piece for public comment tonight because this was really about us having a conversation, and it's far too soon in the process, I think, for public comment right now. But at some point, to have some sort of public input, I think would be important. And I don't know if that's when a proposal happens and then we comment on it, but it's a big change for our community. And I think that we need to respect that it's a big change and respect the community at large and hear what they have to say.
So, August 1st, personally, I feel like you only have been on the ground for 30 days at that point.
It's
so
kinda-
you're still kind of like figuring out where the doors
Yeah,
are.
but Steve's been there. Steve, get it done, have Meredith sign it.
It's immaterial to me as long as it's a robust, well-thought-out plan that is, which you're very, in all the
Yeah.
conversations, several conversations I had with you, you're very thoughtful. So, but I just want a well-thought-out, long-term plan that has some actions we can take in this next year's budget, that like, because that's the only way we codify it. The only way it actually ever gets codified is when we pass budgets. So, like, we can talk partnership all the time, but if, what we need to see is in November, when we're having our October conversations, budgets that have, like, stuff that's happening.
And I would say one more, walk before you run. I think a well-thought-out plan, but you don't have to address every single possible shared service under the sun.
That's-
Pick something and let's do it well, because in that we'll find the credibility and the trust that we can continue to move forward and tackle bigger ones.
And that would be
or
my
more.
concern. I don't want to go in there and say, we're going to combine everything on day one, and it fails.
Right.
You're right, walk before you can run. Even baby crawl before you can walk.
Or crawl first, right,
Yeah.
let's just,
This is new. This is new concepts. Well, it's interesting. We keep saying it's new concept.
It's not, we
Cities
do a
do
lot
it.
of it.
You know, I started my municipal government career in a city. I was surprised that you didn't share, that towns and school districts didn't share services. Massachusetts, the MRI and I have been talking, Mr. Gould and I, they do it in Massachusetts. We know they do it in Maine. So there are models out there that we can follow. And it's not, reinventing the wheel on everything. It's just we got to figure out what fits best for us. And, I've got my ideas. I can tell you, as soon as I started looking at things, I heard this. There have been talks between myself and previous superintendents of sharing services. They didn't get quite that far for different reasons, but there have been discussions. And, I've looked at models for what other communities do. And so I've already done the research, she's already had the experience, so I'm not expecting it to be a complete re-education, but, you know, when the superintendent comes on, she needs to see what her strengths and weaknesses are in her departments. And then after that is, okay, where do we share and what's in comparison to our strengths and weaknesses and how do we do it? So.
Would it make sense for you to put together a list of things that you think can be consummated in this budget season and then bring them to another joint meeting? Maybe we could get the information prior to that meeting and from your perspective, the pros, the cons, why you think it would work, etc. And then we can discuss it and formalize it, you know, in a format like that, so we have an idea of what the benefit is, what concerns, if any, you have, and then the boards can make a determination as to how they want to proceed.
I think that's a great thought, and that is a necessity for another meeting for sure. I mean, we've got to be responsive too. So I think Gary's right on.
I think it makes sense from an efficiency point of view, so they don't have to present it
Exactly.
at board meetings and
Yeah.
share each other's input.
Yeah.
Just one other quick thing. With respect to the discussion about unwinding things, I think there should be some type of measurement. I would try to choose things that can be diagnosed as easily as possible, so that we can get some feedback, and in the event it's not working or it is working or whatever, we can then proceed based on the information we're getting back. I don't think we need a prenup. I think if it's not working, I would hope that we would know that, we would be told that, and we'd go to Plan B, because we can always go back to Plan B, which is what we're doing now to some degree. Just a thought.
Hopefully, we can plagiarize heavily on this. I'm sure it's been thought of and as a model.
But I think what Councilor Levy brings up, it's an interesting point. It's a good one, I think, that we can't just hear it's not working. Like, there has to be some metric as to what working looks like, what not working looks like. So it doesn't become, it's different, I don't like it, it's not working.
Right.
I think the other thing we've got to be sensitive to is we've got employees who are going to be looking at this discussion and wondering what's in their future. And I think Steve and Meredith need to provide some kind of confidence to employees. And I'm not sure what form that's going to take. I have my biases, but well, I'll share my bias. My bias is that I don't think employees ought to be looking over their shoulders that they're going to lose their job. I think employees ought to be looking over their shoulders, maybe saying, I'm going to be in a different job. I'm going to be doing things differently. Maybe when you leave your job through attrition, you don't get filled. And that's a big step for me to say that, but I think it's important that it be out in the open, that this is not a hush-hush, because somebody's going home tonight and not liking the sounds of this. So, again, I'd hand it over to you guys to decide how to do that.
Speaking of employees not liking the sound of it, how are we integrating the MRI study into this?
My sense is, we invited MRI tonight to hear the discussion. They've already gone through to find efficiencies in operations for all the town departments. And this would be, the next step is to see what efficiencies and sharing we could do with the school. They have experience in communities in Massachusetts and Kittery, Maine, places around here sharing services. So it's not new for them either, so they can probably assist us by saying, okay, here are some low-hanging fruits you can pick right now, and this is the way we would recommend you do it. And here are some longer, more challenging ones that you're going to have to work on together to be successful. So they are going to be integrating part of it in there. Am I missing anything else?
No, the only thing I would add is, we may be able to find that there is capacity in some of your positions to take on some extra duties, which could come from the schools. Or we may find out that there are some deficiencies which could be enhanced, could be taken care of better, more positively, with some help from the other side, or with that other staff person, if you were talking about adding staff, just talking about a facilities manager, for example. So I think that those may go together pretty well.
As long as they're being integrated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think, I don't know that we need a vote. I think you've heard an endorsement for that, everybody wants to proceed with the process.
What's a realistic time frame? Is it middle of September? Is it-
I would say early September. I want to give her time to get settled and.
Yeah, I do think there are some obvious openings and opportunities that
Right.
exist right now that I think we want to move forward on in this fiscal year. And I think to talk about those by August 1st, along with sort of a rough idea of where we might want to move in future budget years, is very doable.
The low-hanging fruit seems to be a no-brainer.
Exactly, and I think to sort of, here's a tentative move forward. We don't know how this year is going to work out. We're going to test that out. Here's how we would report back to you on whether or not it's working in terms of an evaluation metric as you described. I met today with a neighboring district, and we share a food services director, and this was the first year that we've shared that director, but we built in checkpoints along the way to make sure it was working. And today we extended that contract for an additional 2 years because it's been very successful on both sides. So making sure that we are checking in on that, getting feedback from the community, from the stakeholders within the organizations are really important, is a really important part of the process.
The most important thing on our side is the buy-in from the two boards. One of the most frustrating things when it comes to intermunicipal agreements with other municipalities is what I mentioned earlier, is the silos and not wanting to give up authority or not give up control of something. And at some point in time, there's going to be either combined control or one entity is going to give up control to another. But we have to trust that. And that's going to be the biggest challenge I see as we move on.
We were talking about we all need boilers. I'm assuming that hasn't been ameliorated yet, has it?
No.
So, based on that, what do we do now? Look, the town, somebody says we have a problem at town hall, so we get a proposal theoretically from the DPW person or whomever, and then we maybe go with something that's LP. I'm just making this up. And then the school decides they need to fix their boiler, and maybe they go with oil.
Yep.
So are those things that could be somewhat aggregated, and then someone can do some kind of an analysis as to, what?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's exactly it. One of the things, especially with an item such as boilers, is that you may need redundancy in parts. So because one of the things we always hear is, okay, our boiler broke down, the part won't be in for, a week or so. Well, we have a bunch because we have the same system across the board.
Or we may have a shared service
Right.
contract. So that there's one phone number to call in the event that a boiler fails in any of our facilities.
And if
Which
you're
you
gonna
guys
buy
can
them-
do now, even without a facilities director.
Right.
Right.
You guys are at least being aware of it
Yeah.
now means you are going to
Yeah.
talk, which is a huge step forward.
In our town, we have 4 service providers for boilers. 4 different service providers.
Yeah,
for
and
boilers.
I do want to throw that out with the discussion of the library. Remember, the library law in New Hampshire is a different entity as well.
Yes.
That they have their control over there, so that would be the next discussion to try to do some group things with them as well. But this is
But if they were brought in,
Yeah, they would.
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably want to take it.
Yeah.
So is what we're hearing, August 1st, we ought to be scheduling another joint committee meeting, is that?
Mid-September?
I think that's too aggressive. I think September 1st. If we want something that's not thrown together.
My worry about September 1st is we are off and running with the school year.
I was going
Right.
to say the 15th, but I don't want to.
Yeah, then the 15th, yeah, it's,
I think that's kind of realistic to have something tangible for us to perhaps
But
act on.
I can't imagine that, well, forgive me if I didn't imagine it. I would not imagine that it would just, let's all wait until 15 September, and then you lay out this grand vision, because I would expect that at meetings in July and in August, and even leading up to that, both boards are gonna hear from you guys or from you guys,
Yeah.
hey, we're eating on this, we're chewing on this,
That's
this
what
is an
should
idea.
happen.
Yeah.
It's
Be brought to
simply
the-
that we gotta have a final product before we pass a budget, because we don't wanna miss the opportunity to codify this or codify this, like you
I
said.
would think it would be brought to the boards as you're working on it.
Baby steps as we go, yeah.
I think the August 1st date is a good target date, because it will take time to get through the boards and the systems, whatever. And so if you can have something, but then it doesn't mean we have to meet on August 1st. But it means that you and Steve can schedule when that is presented, either to a joint meeting or to
Right,
the
for us to meet
respective
maybe
boards.
15 September, 30 September, like, so that's too late for him. He's still gotta have more for budget before the 15th, right?
I mean, but odds are by the
August
14th
15th, we should
September,
be able to.
my budget is being wrapped up, but we've already been working on it.
Right.
So I'm gonna be already, if by that point in time, I'm gonna say, look, this is what's gonna be my budget next year, you'll see all the final
We
numbers.
don't need one of these.
Right, yeah, so here we go, this is what, you're gonna see a reduction here for this reason.
So early August is doable.
Right, and the other thing is, if on the 14th of September, which is a Wednesday evening, it doesn't, you guys say no, I still have time to go back in my budget and add something, or change something, because it's not gonna work. So I think it gives us time to work on it, but it also gives me time to meet my duties by the charter to present a budget a month later.
But I thought, Meredith, you were almost expressing that you'd like it to be earlier.
Yeah, my concern with waiting until September, particularly if we are making any progress on a facilities project, if that is an area that we're looking at, to just be having discussion about whether or not we want to move forward with posting and hiring a shared position in mid-September, I think puts us in a difficult position. I would think if that is a position we're contemplating, we would want to be moving on that.
Let me make a suggestion, and people can, just to say that perhaps the subcommittee could continue to exist just because it facilitates discussions across the board. And that we say up front that we would like to have another combined school board town council meeting in mid-August. August 1st is still the deadline. That will give us a document that we can start to distribute, but we would try to meet somewhere in that period.
Or is it when that the subcommittee is there, we meet with the subcommittee, they check our progress and say, are we ready for a meeting in mid-August? Maybe not, and this is the reason why.
Yeah.
Let's bump that one to the September one? Or
We can push it out if we
That
need
way
to,
we-
but we would start with the idea that we're going to do.
we're not scheduling a meeting just to have a meeting either.
And I do know that for the school board side, our subcommittee is a continuing item on the agenda, so anytime that we meet between now and then, Al and I can report on it, and I'm sure the same thing would happen on the town council side, so that those conversations continue on all levels as we're moving forward.
It just sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, from what I heard, that there's one position that's sort of been talked about lightly. Two positions that have sort of been driving like the urgency of this. So I just feel like saying we have to do it by August 1st because of these two positions, like, why does it have to be one big grand plan, as they refer to? Like, why can't we talk about those two positions, and then it's a longer-term plan that's gonna go into the budget?
I think that is the
That's
plan.
exactly what
Okay.
they're saying.
I think
yeah.
that's what we're talking about, really, Phil.
Right.
Yeah, I think we would want to give you detail about those immediate needs and then projections for
Right.
longer-term budgetary implications.
And I can speak for the, I guess I could thank Nate for this, but we have on the school board agenda, each one of us are assigned to report every week on our individual assignments, whether it be the search committee or the facilities committee or communications. And it would be my expectation that we would present, that would remain on the school committee's agenda. We would tell them what we know after having talked to you folks about progress. Maybe not specifics, but keeping everybody up to date, so that the presentation isn't a big surprise.
The other point, just to echo a point you made earlier, Al, I think, employees shouldn't be concerned that either of us are trying to wipe out the infrastructure as it presently exists. I think right now we're talking about there are some obvious vacancies with some obvious opportunities to share resources, and that is a logical starting point, and it doesn't mean displacing anyone. And we will look at those efficiencies moving forward and be thoughtful about a plan for how to best address the needs of the community.
Right. And we still need to see how we work, how we can work together, and how we will work together. We don't want to just say, oh yeah, no, we're going to wipe something out or do, go that route. We need to see first. And somebody needs to tell us that, okay, this is how we can share things and make sure it works before we go too far down.
So are we, I don't know, again, of whether.
Closing comments?
Yeah, closing comments, and then anybody that doesn't like the idea of this subcommittee continuing to do what we've been doing. I haven't heard anybody say that yet, and if so, I think what I've heard is that we endorse that Meredith and Steve will move forward in developing this proposal, that they are going to try to have this sort of the preliminary plan by August 1st. We will, on a preliminary basis, expect that we might be meeting as a combined group in mid-August, and that the subcommittee will continue to stay engaged to facilitate communication and preparation of that agenda. If anybody doesn't agree with that, they should speak up now, because otherwise I'm going to say we've agreed to that. So, or how about everybody say aye, and then we can.
You're changing the rules, Dan. Come on.
I think we can now move forward to agenda item number 5.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the CIP because that's really the thing that brought us, I think, to this place. And I feel like we're going backwards just a little bit in terms of the flow of the meeting. But I wanted to start actually by talking just very briefly about the Charter Commission, because when Al said that the stars have aligned, I think that that was the first star. I really think that the Charter Commission, which was in 2014, there's a group of 9 individuals who were elected to review the charter. And what we did was we looked at things that were maybe omitted, things that needed to be changed, things that needed to be addressed. At the time, there was some talk about wanting to change the form of government, I think in order to create efficiencies, but that never really got off the ground. But one of the things that we did do and what we talked about was how to bring these 2 separate bodies together on a regular basis. And because the school and the town traditionally hadn't worked well together. And so what we did, and I think that the language is actually really important, what we added into the charter was that at least annually, the town council shall invite the school board to a meeting to discuss projects currently under discussion and anticipated activity for the coming year. So that's kind of where the CIP process comes in. And it was at that point, actually, I think it was through the charter process that we realized that the school had to be involved in the CIP program in order to receive impact fees. So it was really what it was about. So it was all around that same time. So when we talk about the stars aligning, that was really the beginning of that, I think. So I just wanted to talk really briefly. Some of this, it's like CIP 101. A lot of the people at the table probably know all of this information, maybe not. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what the CIP is. And basically, the capital improvement plan, sometimes people talk about capital reserve funds, they are 2 separate things. So the plan is a tool for the town council, the school board, and the budget committee to plan for the future needs of the community. It's one of the only times that representatives from all of those boards get together on a regular basis. And so with the addition of the school board member on the CIP committee, I thought that was really very beneficial. I served as the town council rep this past year, and it was, I thought it was a great experience. It was really interesting to see all of the needs of our community. And it's the one place where that happens. So the committee is made of 2 at-large members, and then reps from planning, budget, town council, and the school board. And I was actually surprised going through all this information that Diane Hardy, the town planner, is not actually a member of the CIP because she does all the work. And and most of the information that I'm kind of spewing tonight is a direct result.
Yeah,
Well, no, I know,
there's a
but-
reason.
But Diane puts all the information together.
The
I mean, she
CIP
really.
is actually a planning document. It's not a financial document, even though it's, most people use it because of the fact that it's part of your master plan and your impact fees. The purpose is that you need to justify if you're going to charge impact fees by showing what your large capital projects are in the future. And that's a planning tool. And in return, the planning board then looks at it and says, okay, then we can look at this kind of development in the future, so we rezone it that way. So yeah, the town planner is the staff person to the planning, CIP committee.
And she put together fabulous reports, and she's really, like I said, the person who does all the work and very much appreciated on the CIP. So the plan takes into account, as Steve said, it's the goals of the town council, the master plan, and then it also looks at the town's overall financial capability. And it's looking at a 6-year period, so it's not just an individual year, but our current CIP goes into 2023, which is staggering to me. But that's 6 years from now. So a capital project basically is a non-recurring annual expense as opposed to operating costs. And so an example of that would be the wastewater treatment plant. So the design and construction is the capital expense, and then the maintenance, the hiring of personnel is the operating expense. Much like a school facility will be, a capital expense. And then there's different funding for capital projects. One of the things that we talked about on the CIP this past year, there were one-time expenditures that could be included in the annual budget. So an example of that was playground equipment that was requested by the recreation director. That was something, it was in the capital plan, it was a capital project, but didn't need to have 6 years of funding to buy new playground equipment. And then there are capital reserve fund contributions. So a lot of our projects are funded that way. It's like putting different, it's having different savings accounts for some of the projects that we want to do that are bigger. Fire trucks. The McAllen Dam is a good example of that. We have the McAllen Dam Capital Reserve Fund, which I think has $100,000. We put $50,000 or $100,000 in this past year for engineering fees, and then also with the expectation that at some point we're going to need to fix the McAllen Dam. And so putting $50,000 isn't going to cover it, but putting aside a little money every year will help offset those costs. And then obviously bonding is another way to fund our capital projects. I don't know when the school stuff is coming up, so I just keep looking. Okay.
It's after this.
So just to give a sense of the capital improvement plan for this fiscal year, the town department heads requested $1.8 million for various capital reserve projects for FY17. The CIP committee actually approved slightly more than that. And then what happens is that then it goes to the town administrator, who can then say, well, we have money in this area, and this can be funded in that way. So we don't have to appropriate $1.8 million in this budget cycle. We can do it through other ways. Or this project doesn't get funded this year. I mean, so there are a lot of decisions that have to be made, and the town administrator proposed about $625,000 for fiscal year 17. And then what the town council proposed to the budget committee was actually less than that, and that was $575,000.
Yeah, that's the big step that sometimes gets forgotten, that the CIP committee recommends a capital improvement plan to me, because it's, the town administrator presents the budget to the town council. So I have to go through and look and determine the classic wants versus needs, and how do we fund it. So, yes, we may have a request of $1.8 million, but I can't do everything in 1 year with the budget that we have and take into consider the tax rate. So I have to look at other ways to do it. So I do reduce it most of the time. So.
But for instance, that 575,000 wasn't to do projects. Some chunk of that was to put into the capital reserve earmarked for that purpose.
Most of it was for capital reserve contributions.
Okay.
Sort of taking things to the school side, as I've learned through this process of the subcommittee and everything, and what Tony just alluded to, this CIP process is a newer process for the school side of things. Basically, we've been in the process for 2 years of planning out these long-range projects. And prior to that, all large expenditures were a warrant article situation every time. This necessary paradigm shift really allows us to plan these larger expenses more effectively. And so basically with the CIP, Al sat on the committee as the school board rep, the administrators and the SAU made recommendations for expenditures for fiscal year 16-17 for us up to 21-22. And the first item was building security in both of the schools. And, we've been talking about shared services, and with tremendous input and support from Chief Sear and his team, the board has approved the issues to address the security issues expeditiously. We had tremendous input from the police force to help us with moving forward with security, and we have approved that to occur over the summer. So that piece of the CIP is happening. And the next pieces at both schools are facilities issues, and I'm going to briefly go into them, and when I get back to the facilities talk at the end, they're all long-range CIP plans, assuming we don't have a facilities issue, but as we know, there's going to be a facilities issue, they'll be addressed in another way. So if we look at the junior, senior high, it's been alluded to earlier tonight, there's the boiler issue, windows that need to be replaced, and various forms of room renovations of all types at the junior, senior high. At the elementary school, again, in conjunction with the Public Works Department, we need to do some site work at the end of the exit, because there's a water situation that occurs there that is not safe. Gym renovations, as well as carpet and window replacement. As I'll talk later on about what's going to happen potentially with both buildings, with the facilities committee, these issues will all be addressed, but at that point with the CIP, we wanted to get them in there to get them long-range planned out. So that's where that sort of stands.
And some of the town capital projects, and I didn't list all of them, there were plenty, and the entire document is available on the website, but, there were things like the roof of the DPW, bathrooms at Town Hall, a lot of these things, some of them have happened. Playground equipment, vehicles are typically always included in the, in one department or another. We always add some vehicles, whether it's police or fire or DPW. I mentioned the McAllen Dam Capital Reserve Fund before. So there's, those are just some examples of capital projects that the town has had to undertake. And then, anticipated projects are, again, the dam. I think that that's going to be probably one of the bigger ones for our town. We talked about roads as a capital. We started a capital reserve fund for the roads, and at some point we may need to, we've talked about potentially bonding a road program. We are awaiting that plan from UNH, so hopefully we'll have some more information soon. And then obviously school facilities is the other big thing facing the town.
The biggest one for the town and for the school at this point is a facilities issue. The goal of the school board is to have an addition, renovation, or a new school warrant article on the ballot next March. That is the goal. And the secondary goal of that is to address challenges and issues at both the schools. To that end, the very dedicated members of the facilities committee led by school board member Mike Kennison, along with the building principals, Pat Ballantyne, Meredith Nader, who's been serving a great deal, they've done a substantial amount of work trying to get the situation where it needs to be. Primarily, right now, they've looked over the educational specifications. And these are the program requirements that, and the things that go on in the building today in terms of program needs, and looking forward in terms of what are the goals for future spaces. So that when we come up with a plan that is a building project, it encompasses all the things that we want to have in a school moving forward. They have gone thoroughly through these, fine-tooth comb, over and over. Hours and hours of work have been done to get these as specific as possible so that they can go to the Bandwell, and Bandwell's been a part of this process also, the architects, to come up with plans for both buildings and various plans for the junior, senior high, so that people can then provide their input on those plans. To that end, starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, there are going to be public forums held right here in the Town Hall auditorium for the public to come. There's one tomorrow from 9 to 10:30 a.m., on Saturday the 4th from 10 to 11:30, June 7th from 6 to 7:30 p.m., and the 16th from 5:30 to 7 before that school board meeting. We really want to have people come from the community to provide their feedback and let us know what they're thinking in terms of this building. And this has been talked about a lot tonight in various ways. As a result of this major project that we're going to be undertaking, whatever it looks like, in our budget process for the school board, we did budget to hire a person to manage our facilities. Primarily, that person would be responsible for the day-to-day management of the facilities process that we engage in. And then, as Mike said, in terms of moving forward, managing the renovation or the new building or whatever it is, and then manage the maintenance of those buildings moving forward so that we can maintain the stuff that we've done. Mike, is there anything else I need to add in terms of that?
No, that's it, Kim, thank you.
Okay. So that's, and I think we all need to, as two bodies, participate in these forums too, and encourage the townspeople to come and be a part of this process because it impacts us all. So that's all I have.
Well, I don't know, we knew it is, again, the charter that we would discuss the CIP plan at this point in the meeting. It's approaching 9 o'clock. I don't know that this is the forum to get into detail on those, on the CIP plan. So I think if there are no comments about the CIP plan or any other comments about any topic we've discussed tonight in general, I think, we can, we're moving towards adjournment, but at this point.
I don't want to belabor the meeting or prolong it or anything, but I just think, just because I also served on the CIP committee before Councilor Weinstein, we as a community have a lot of capital reserve funds, especially for the size we are, a ton. And it's because historically, and I looked around here, I'm like, I can't believe there's not a townie on the board right now to say this. So I'll say it for them, that historically we've been savers. We have saved and then spent, as opposed to bonding. We have very low debt. Everyone says that.
Extremely low
because debt. Because we just have proactively looked forward and said, through strong capital improvement plans, what do we need to save, put it in capital reserve funds, and expend it. So I just think that we should probably, as we're moving forward and talking about this jointly, just consider the tradition that we've had of that as a piece of this. I recognize some projects should be far too big to do that for, but I think it's just something that we should consider, just the historic culture of saving and spending in Newmarket, and it's done, I think, a pretty decent job of helping keep our tax rate as flat as possible.
And yet, that's true, and yet 2 years ago, we had no CIP plan for the school.
Exactly.
And as a result of that, every time, rather than saving for boilers, we go out with a warrant article and it whacks taxes. Town's done a great job in savings account. The school has done okay with its reserves, but it wasn't a tool that we ever used, that the school ever used before. And so you're gonna see some changes in money spent on CIP.
The only difference, though, for clarity's sake, is that the machinations that the town had to go through to retain its process of budgeting for savings. The school can't do that. So when we save the same way, it'll be on a series of warrant articles each year.
The school
Because
not start a capital reserve fund?
we can't,
Through warrant.
Right.
we can't buy, you can't you can't take general operating budget surplus and put it in capital reserve, nor can you budget for an amount that you put in a capital reserve. You have to put in a separate warrant article.
The process, the difference in the process of this, the council can create a capital reserve fund as long as it doesn't expend, doesn't contribute to it anytime it wants to as a legislative body. The council now has authority, which it was doing in the past, to include the appropriation to the capital reserve funds in the operating budget. So it's the one line item. The school must, to create and to fund a capital reserve fund, have separate warrant articles.
That's exactly what we did 2 years ago.
That one year, you had to do it.
The correction.
We have to do it like that every year. There's no reason why we shouldn't have done it, and I applaud the town, and I agree, to have saved up so that when it's time to buy a fire truck, you just buy a fire truck. You know, because you've already planned for that, anticipated and saved, and we don't take it on the chin when that happens, is a great idea. It's a, part of the reason why it's a mind bend for schools in general is because you feel like every year you're fighting to justify all of these spending lines that you're putting out there. And hopefully that's not going to be an issue in the town of Newmarket, because in Newmarket, they're accustomed to having us take the money today and put it away for tomorrow. So I think we ought to do more of that.
And historically, though, the school board the warrant articles have been surplus that go to the
Right.
funds, not
But they're separate warrant articles that do it.
extra budget.
It's not an appropriation,
Yeah,
quote
yeah.
unquote. I mean, it's still, don't forget, money that could have gone back to offset tomorrow's tax rate is what we're setting aside. So it's not free money or found money, it's your money, but,
No.
you know.
I'm going to put this out there, in that I think, to some extent, the school board particularly, I mean, growing up in my experience with other school boards is, school board should be concerned with education and the programs with the kids and that sort of thing. And y'all have been so upside down and sideways trying to figure out building codes and this, that, and the other thing, that one thing I'm looking forward to, whereas on the council side, not that we're great with it, but we tend, the council and the town administrator tends to be more on the business of running a town. It's a different animal. And I think to some extent what I'm hoping it'll do is actually free up you guys on the school board a little bit to get back to what I believe is your mission statement. And town councils is very different, and if we can help each other do that so that you guys can do a better job for the kids and not have to worry about some of this quite so much, or that nobody has to worry about it quite so much, I think that would be a great upside to this.
Not to digress just briefly, because I don't want to keep us any longer. We also have a mandate from DES to do water runoff mitigation and stormwater. And just two thoughts on the CIP. The CIP generally comes in significantly higher than what we end up budgeting. And I think it's good that, I'm sure everyone doesn't agree with me, but I think it's good that we glean the CIP and try to run it as efficiently as possible. And I think the reason the town has a pretty good credit rating in general, even though we're aggregated with other communities, is because we don't have a lot of debt. So I think we tried to keep an eye on that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when the school has a leftover dollars that are returned to the town, correct? That's, that was budgeted in but not spent.
Right.
Correct?
It has to go back, all except for that new legislation from a couple of years ago that we haven't used.
You can put a
but
few bucks away.
You put a few bucks away, but we have to, there's another shared service. We should talk about why, when and why before we do that, because it should be tailored, I think, to some plan, because next year we're going to do this and revenues are going to look like this, and we already know it. So if you save a little bit, that'll help us with tax impact in the subsequent period, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
If there's no real good plan, I think it's a good tool to have in the, it's a good quiver to have in the, or bow to have in the quiver, is that what that? But
Arrow in the arrow.
in the quiver. Never been out in the field with one of those. You're all so thankful. It's a good tool to have, but I don't see us using it until we've had some shared conversation about it.
And if there's RSAs that are really holding you back from being, as a body, from being able to do what the council does with CIPs,
Just ignore
Or there's elected officials
Right.
at the state level we can talk to that can help us change the RSA so that the municipalities and school boards can do the same thing.
But you're right, Nate. I mean, the discussion between the town and the school board relative to surpluses is critical. And we make our own decisions independently as it currently is, and we should be making them together.
We've had plenty of CIPs where we've had money put aside, and then we've held off spending it because the truck didn't need to be replaced or whatever. So, you know, I mean, we do the best we can, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I would just urge people to consider the CIP isn't always money to have to spend, just a thought.
You raised a good point, too. I'd just like to recognize Michael Cahill, who has been along, Steve has spoke already, in some sense, the state legislature has been responsive in that the law was changed to allow the town and the school to collaborate. Michael's done a great job of, I've communicated, and I think he's communicated with others in the town.
He's also done a great job on taking a leadership role on state funding. He's been a big sponsor of ours.
Can I embarrass him a little bit more?
Sure.
He's also taken a lead role working with the DOE most recently in vetting the possibility of an application for retroactive emergency building aid for some of the life safety stuff that's been done at the senior high over the past few years. An application is going to be submitted shortly for that. There is some, without getting hopes up, there is some promise there. It's separate from the building aid that there's a moratorium indefinitely on that, but this is a different pot.
So we can expect millions and millions of dollars.
It comes from nowhere. It just magically appears.
Thank you for the work that you did to help coordinate. Thank you guys for the work that you did prepping it. Thank you for the countless hours that you will commit in the month of July.
Yeah.
Welcome to Newmarket.
Yeah.
A member of either board or council can make a motion to adjourn at this point.
So moved.
Technically, it's a council meeting. You must invite the school board, so.
Oh, okay.
Second.
We are adjourned.